Namaste, hello, and welcome to India Global Week 2020. Be the revival, India and a better new world. I'm your host, Priyanka Deo, reporting live from New Delhi. Some fabulous discussion so far. We're about to have a great conversation. So please stay tuned and sit tight. There's a lot more coming up. For now, if you're posting any social media, your thoughts, your questions, use hashtag #BeTheRevival. And as Manoj said in his video, this is a great platform of exchanging ideas, actually bringing it into action. The stats are amazing. I'm so excited to announce that we have over 10,000 registered attendees from 69 countries at this conference, and we're on day 2 over here. So fantastic. Lovely to have all of you here. I'm humbled at hosting it and excited for more. With that being said, let's go on to our next conversation. We have an exclusive conversation with Mr. Rajat Gupta. Mr. Gupta served as the CEO of McKinsey and was the first foreign-born managing director of McKinsey and Company. Mr. Gupta was also a board member of the following corporations: Goldman Sachs, Procter & Gamble, and American Airlines, and an advisor to nonprofits, including the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, as well as the Global Fund to Fight AIDS, Tuberculosis, and Malaria. He's a co-founder of the Indian School of Business, the America India Foundation, and New Silk Route and Sandin Solutions. Our moderator and host for this conversation is Ms. Barkha Dutt. So without further ado, let's have this conversation. Ms. Dutt, namaste, and the floor is all yours.
Thank you so much, and good evening, good afternoon, good morning, depending on where you are at this point in the world. Technology has made it possible for us to be sitting in different parts of the world and be having this conversation, and it is my pleasure to bring Rajat Gupta into this conversation now. We're here to talk about leadership, and this session is titled Mind Without Fear. Those 3 words are not just, of course, Rabindranath Tagore's famous and legendary invocation. They're also the name of Mr. Gupta's memoirs. Mr. Gupta has had a dramatically eventful life. He's seen both the highs and lows of what life can bring. He's been the toast of town, and then he has also had to serve in prison on charges of insider trading, charges that he felt were unfairly leveled against him. And he maintained that even when he wrote his book and his biography, as I said, which is called Mind Without Fear. They say life tests you not in the good times, but in moments of crisis. Rajat Gupta has been, after his time in prison, rebuilding his life, rebuilding his business interests, rebuilding his interest in philanthropy. What has he learned from this tumult in his life, both the good and the bad? That's some of what we're going to talk today. Rajat, welcome to the conversation. Let me start by picking up on what the session is called and what your book was called, Mind Without Fear. Is your mind really without fear? And if I had to ask you, when were you the most fearful? What phase of your life would you identify that phase to be?
Thanks, Barkha, and I'm delighted to be here. It's a great question, because when I was thinking about the title of the book, it to me is a wonderful poem, and it's an aspiration. You want your mind to be without fear. And most of my life, I have ventured into areas where I've been unafraid and done things that I felt were for the good of society by and large, and businesses I led and otherwise. But there were, of course, moments when you succumb to fear. And one of those moments clearly was when I was confronted with this trial. I didn't know very much about the legal system and how it was. And I must say that I was a bit frozen and, in fact, fearful of what... and I didn't act with my characteristic, I would say, completely unafraid of things and go at it, because my lawyers kept saying, don't testify. I was just illustrating a moment where one of the regrets is I should have really testified in my own defense, and I didn't, because the lawyers said, that's not what you should do, and I succumbed to fear, because they said if you do that, you will, it'll be even worse, and they will sentence you more, etc., etc. Anyway, so I said that this is a aspiration I have and everybody should have. And that's the reason I picked the title. And there were few other moments where fear overtook me. But I must say that by and large, when I was in prison and even when I was in solitary confinement, I felt fairly unafraid. I felt that this is what I had to do, and I will do with my eye.
Can you describe? I know you've always said that you're not testifying was the single biggest mistake you made, but can you describe what fear felt like? Was it before you went to prison? Was it inside prison? Was it being in solitary confinement, which you, as you said, was a disproportionate punishment for what you called a minor infraction? Whatever the views are on your particular case, I think the audience would be interested in what fear feels like, especially because we can't talk about the absence of fear till we actually talk about what fear feels like.
Well, I think part of it was, I'll tell you different moments when it came. I remember the time I actually was in India when the charges came out, and it was a moment. Of course, I was expecting it. Maybe they would do it for a few days, and but when it came, it hit like a tsunami. And obviously, there's a huge amount of press coverage. But more importantly, I had to immediately decide what to do about various activities. I was involved in many business and many not-for-profit institutions. And I decided that it was important that I resigned from all of them. And then there was this moment of fear. Okay, I went back to the US and my calendar was clean. There was nothing, absolutely nothing. And, up to that point in time, I had every scheduled, and Monday morning, I had absolutely nothing to do other than to, think about how I'm going to tackle this case. That was a moment of fear, the great uncertainty. Another real moment of fear was when I was going to prison, not for myself, but I said, how will my family cope with my being in prison? I was very afraid of the effect on them, the consequences on them. That was a fear on behalf of them. Of course, they are resilient people and they came out quite well, but it is something that, the wise definitely afraid of.
That moment in solitary confinement, how did you remain calm?
So it's interesting. I don't know, those of you who don't know what solitary confinement looks like, it's at least in this prison, it is, imagine a kind of a cell about 6 feet by 10 feet or so. And there's all the things in it are made of steel. That is, it's hard, concrete and steel. And you have a very thin mattress, which is about maybe, 1 inch, which is many people have slept on it and doesn't give you any real comfort. There's a huge big door, steel door. And they bring you in handcuffed. Open the door, the steel door has a little slot. And that's where they put your meals in through. And they don't give you much warning, and if you catch the meal, it's great. If you don't catch the meal, it falls on the floor and you have to pick up and eat what you have. Mostly it's cold. You have no one to talk to, absolutely no one to talk to. Very strange environment because they don't tell you anything. They don't tell you what is going to happen to you, when it's going to happen to you. You would think it's a very quiet place. Solitary confinement would imply that. But it's one of the noisiest places in the prison because basically you have a row of cells and people are in fact going crazy. And they're banging on the doors and shouting and so on and so forth, and through the night. It is so bad in some ways that you have a very bright light. There's no windows there's a tiny window, but there's a bright neon light. and the switch is actually outside your door. So they switch it on whenever they feel like. So it could be on for all night, and you're sleeping under this. Given all this, it was interesting because I convinced when they were taking me to the solitary confinement, I had the Bhagwat Gita with me. And I convinced them that this was my Bible and they had to let me take it. They cannot stop me taking it. It was a bit of a fight, but they finally let me take it. And it was interesting. I read the Bhagwat Gita 5 or 6 times, cover to cover. I read it before, but this was quite a revelation in terms of just being able to reflect on it and understand the messages that it gives. And that was very helpful. I mean, because firstly, it puts the Bhagavad Gita puts the world in its context. There are many messages that in there that are very helpful. For example, the idea of being a karma yogi. You just say, I do what I think is the right thing to do and do it the best of my ability, and the results and consequences are whatever they are. You live with them. There is, of course, starts off in chapter 2. It's about the soul, which is a fascinating thing. It puts the world in context. It says, basically, you are ultimately what your Atman, or soul is, and it cannot be destroyed. So all this solitary confinement or whatever they're doing, it doesn't really matter as long as you are intact in your own self-concept. It's very strong theme of, you have to be, if you really, the person who can be the same in great joy or in great sorrow, in good times or in bad times. Sort of equanimity is a value. So you have to be able to, stay even keeled through the worst of times and the best of times. And those kinds of messages and thinking about them, and also thinking about my own father who spent 10 years in prison for a great cause, was very comforting. And I had no problem actually in solitary confinement. I felt this was being in prison with room service, so to say.
That's, you can say that today, being in prison with room service, and that sounds like very laconic, almost humorous. I can bet you it didn't feel like that.
Well, it wasn't so bad actually. I even had a little, the guard who sent me there, I took a little bit of tiny getting back at him. One thing I can do in prison is, because my appeal was still going on, I could ask for meetings with my lawyers or telephone conversations. And what he had to do was to come to my solitary cell, put me in handcuffs, and take me to a conference room. He had to stand outside because it was a confidential conversation with my lawyer. And I would have these conversations for 2 hours, and the guy would have to stand outside. And that was my way of getting back at him, saying that you need to do this. One day he said to me, "You're strange. You never even asked me when you're getting out of confinement." I said, "Why should I? It's fine with me. It doesn't matter whether I'm outside or inside or, this, as I told him, this is prison with room service." Next week I got out because he thought that I was enjoying solitary confinement.
But, obviously you changed, right? Obviously this entire challenge of your life, the prison time, the solitary confinement, losing friends, losing, business, losing your reputation in a way, it must have transformed you. And yet I know that when I was reading your memoirs, you said you were able to talk to Rajaratnam, the man you were accused of actually helping, quite calmly. And you even played a game or two of Scrabble with him. How is it that you did not feel seething rage towards him, or how is it that you did not look at him and say, "You, the bane of my life, you're the reason that I'm here"? There must have been something in you that flipped, that switched, that flipped, that made you philosophically able to even engage with him. And what is that relationship like today?
Well, I did tell him that he was the reason why I was there.
Yeah.
But he also, as I say in my book, he also had some integrity, because he was offered a great deal to testify against me, and he did not take it. And he always maintained that I had done nothing wrong. I appreciate that very much from his part. Of course, all that happened, he was a business associate. He was not a friend ever per se. And in that sense, I don't think, going forward, he's now out of prison. I wish him the very best. I saw him in prison, but it's unlikely that we are going to be friends going forward. We are not.
What would you say if you met him today?
I would just say the same thing I said to him in prison. I would say that, listen, it's unfortunate. I went through what I went through because of you, but at the same time, I'm thankful to you for not, kind of falsely testifying against me in order to serve your own interests, and that shows some integrity. I wish him the best.
How did you change? Who is Rajat Gupta today that you were not, let's say, 5 years ago?
So the way I would describe it as saying, I felt I started, I had a long business career, but I had started changing my allocation of time, and I was very interested in many social issues, and I was involved in a number of philanthropic activities. And I felt that giving back to society, especially if you have developed a certain kind of skills, in whether it's in management or leadership, so on, was important. And that's the idea behind, my spending a fair amount of time trying to, co-found with many others, the Indian School of Business. And then more importantly, I was very involved in public health. I was working on public health on the Global Fund. I was chairman of the Global Fund, which is the world's largest health fund. And I decided that it was an important issue for India, and we should really get together and create something that will promote the interests of public health in the country. Public health was not regarded that highly. There was very few institutions that educated people in public health. And so we put together a public-private partnership in creating the Public Health Foundation of India. And that has had a wonderful impact, I think, on building the public health profession, building the capacity in public health, and so on. So what is the transformation? It's sort of ongoing on that dimension, because I think after about a 40-year business career, business is less of a interest to me, and now it's much more to do with getting involved in philanthropic activities and issues that matter to me. So I firstly started getting back involved in the Indian School of Business, Public Health Foundation. And then I've got very involved in reform of the justice system in the US, because I saw the underbelly of the justice system here, which needs a lot of reform. You can read it now every day in the newspapers in terms of Black Lives Matter, but that's not the only issue. There are lots and lots of issues in the criminal justice system.
So I'll come to your interest in public health in a few minutes. I want you to talk about the US justice system that you say you're involved and engaged with. Now, the irony is that, you have always argued that the fat cats, in a way, the banking executives got away lightly and you were scapegoated or you were disproportionately punished. That has been your argument. But the person who really went after you was not a white man. He was another brown man. He was another son of immigrants. And I'm talking, of course, about Preet Bharara. And I know that in your book, you talk about how a lot of this unfolded on Diwali, that it was very knowing, it was very deliberate. That is your interpretation of events. But when you, in a sense, argue about being scapegoated, this isn't a classic race or it isn't like saying the white guys got away, the brown guy got punished, because the prosecutor was also a brown guy. So how do you see him and his sort of role in this entire tumult of your life and the developments of your life?
Well, I think you'll have to ask that question of him as to how he picked who he was going after. I mean, he did go after Rajratnam and I would say simply this, and I'll repeat this, that I think that they could not go after the real culprits of the financial meltdown. And when prosecutors who are very ambitious and people say, what have you been doing? Have you been sleeping at the switch? When all these people, they go out and get somebody who, and this, I think this is purely that. Honestly, there's a book written called The Chicken Shit Club. And that was written by another famous guy named Comey, who said that it's the prosecutors who, Chicken Shit Club is the prosecutors who only go after cases they can win. And so, he was able to do that. But I think one has to take a hard look at who did what during that crisis. And it's pretty well known who did what. And none of the people, the leadership of institutions that did a lot of wrongdoing, were truly held accountable.
You've obviously sort of felt that he had political ambitions, right?
Everybody says so.
What do you think?
I do believe yes, political, and it's nothing wrong with that. Nothing particularly wrong with that. But if you do it on the back of trying to create, I mean, you look at what he did for the Indian consul in Jeddah, in New York. It was, I think, way beyond it should have been. It was publicity seeking. By some counts, he had increased his publicity or press staff from like 2 to 11 or 12 is what I heard. Now, that's not what you're supposed to do. You're not supposed to be, running a PR campaign.
When you say that today your focus is on the US justice system, what aspect of it? What are you actually campaigning for or spending your energy in?
Well, there are, there is a lot of policy issues to be discussed in the criminal justice system, but I am very much focused on trying to deliver tangible benefits to the population most affected. So my focus is on helping prisoners when they come out. How do they get back into mainstream society? How do you reduce recidivism in the US prison system, which is very high, like 2/3? How do you make sure that the families of prisoners get support? So we started a sort of grassroots organization to help prisoners when they come out and to help their families and be an advocate for them. That's one thing. And then another thing that I've been involved in, and I'm very, I hope to get more involved, is something called the Marshall Project, which I don't know if you heard of or not, but it sheds light on, it doesn't do any advocacy, but it's a journalistic endeavor, basically to highlight the issues in the US justice system.
Rajat, talk a little bit about how this experience of your own life has changed your idea of what leadership is, what strength is. Before all of this happened to you, I'm sure you would go to the set piece sort of conclaves, leadership conclaves, and you'd hear people talking this kind of MBA jargon. You're the co-founder of the ISB, so you know a lot of management jargon. But when you actually have to live life, right? your whole idea of what leadership is totally alters. So if you had to today talk to people who are looking to you and saying, what can we learn from your life, Mr. Gupta? What would that be?
Well, I think I'll give you some lessons that I've learned from my life, and it is in my book. Part of it has to do with, being passionate about something and following your passions, whether it was early on in my consulting career and try to become the best consultant I could, and provide leadership to that arena, serve clients the best way I could. One lesson through that process I've learned is that you always have to work through people. There are very, very few people in the world can be very successful on their own. I mean, so brilliant, whether it's Steve Jobs or somebody like that, who was so creative and did what he did. But most people have to work through other people. And to the extent that you can make other people successful, they in turn will make you much more successful. And that is, I think, an act of leadership, so mentoring, making other people successful. I would also say that, you should take a look at what skills you have developed through life and think about how those skills can be deployed for the good of society. I mean, it's interesting to me, when you have a long career in management consulting, you know how to solve problems, you know how to improve businesses. But in some ways, it's much easier than tackling, I spent a lot of 5 years plus on trying to figure out how to reduce malaria deaths. A million children died of malaria in the world. And all the solutions were known, how to solve it, but it was never done because it was a leadership and management challenge. Countries had to take on programs that were very simple, but you had to bring skills like making sure you got the bed nets to every little village and that it was a compliance. And these were skills that, you hone through helping, you can find a Coke in every little village in Africa, but, how do you get a bed net there and how do you get it distributed? The impact of doing all that and bringing management skills to a problem like that, now the malaria deaths have been reduced from 1 million to 400,000 deaths a year. So I would say everybody has an obligation. The skills you've acquired, whether it be technical skills, management skills, etc., to use that in leverage that in solving problems, societal problems.
So I want to unpack some of the points you made one by one. You spoke about passion. Passion is a great driving force. And you also spoke about people and the importance of people. When you found, and I don't know if you found this, but I'm sure you went through some of this, people you trusted, people you'd invested in, people you'd helped mentor. Did those people stick by you in tough times or did they just drop you?
Well, some stuck by me very much and some did drop me. And one thing that was very interesting, the CEO of Boeing, who used to sit on the board of P&G with me after all this started, he told me, this is the time you'll know who your real friends are. And of course, that is true. And I would say that, many, many people were, kind of, some people went against me, some people just vanished. But many people stayed, and they're friends today, and they have always believed in me and continue to.
So in life, when it feels like you've hit a wall, what would be your advice to people who feel it's all over? What energy do you tap in within yourself to start all over again? Because in some ways, I can't say you had to start all over again because you'd already, you already had your building blocks and more than that in place. And then suddenly this case came and took it all away from you. Did you feel you had to start from zero? Did you feel you were back to the starting line?
No, you see, I don't look at it as saying, you are, everything I did especially, if you think about a business career, you're in the business career, I had accomplished, this happened to me at the tail end of in my 60s. So it's not like I had a full life. And so it was more to do with, thinking about what is the right thing to do. And if you believe in what you do, and if you're passionate about it, you go on doing it without thinking about the consequences. People ask me, aren't you really down because you lost your reputation? I said, I didn't do a single thing to build my reputation. So why do I care about that? I did things because I felt they were right things to do. I didn't start the Indian School of Business to build a reputation. I didn't start the Public Health Foundation to build a reputation. I did it because it was the right thing to do. And now I'll get up and think about what to do for me at this time in my life, and I'll do this without thinking about what the consequence is.
What would you like to do in this sort of last couple of decades of your life? What is it that you would like to devote your life to?
Again, I think it's very much the same as I said before. There are certain skills and capabilities you have picked up through 40 years of working, and I would like to bring that to bear in solving issues that are of societal good nature. I mean, so if I can bring my management thinking, my skills to think about the issue of recidivism, let's pick one. Why is it that 2/3 of the people who come out of prison go right back to prison? What is the conditions that have created that, and what can we do to help that? And if I take in the context of India, I was very involved in thinking through, urban development. I'm very interested in rural development, for example, just now. What is it that one has to do to really improve the quality of life and in a rural setting? How do you bring technology to bear and do it at scale? So I've been involved. I'm chairman of something called the Wheels Foundation, which is something started by IIT alumni. And the idea is to bring technology-based innovation for the rural development, and so we are working towards that. So I mean, the basic point is to bring one's skills and capabilities for the good of others. That's primarily the mission.
Rajat, if you had to pick up one thing that you wish you'd done differently, and I'm not talking about the case, I'm saying you already said you wish you testified, but just life. You look back at life today and you say, that left turn instead of right, that city instead of that city, that moment instead of that moment. Is there such a moment that you wish you'd done differently?
No, I don't know that there's such a moment. I will pick one thing that I felt, when I was after I finished my term at McKinsey, there were lots and lots of opportunities in front of me, many in the philanthropic area, many in commercial business, etc., boards. And I feel I took on too much. It was easy to say yes, and I was extremely fragmented. I could, you get this in your head that you can add value in most places, and you probably can. And there was lots and lots of opportunities, lots and lots of demands on my time, and I probably took on too much, which in the end results in being very fragmented, and you don't apply the judgment that you really need to apply in every situation. So I would say that's part of the reason for this issue that I had, was not critically thinking and about the judgment of what I got involved with, who I got involved with, etc. So I would say, do a lot, but don't do too much.
Yeah, got that. I think that is a life lesson for so many people. Now, given your interest in public health, you're in Connecticut right now. The cases in the United States are spiking. The cases in India are spiking. I'm talking, of course, about the coronavirus. What are you able to give us as observations? Because in India, we initially tried a copy paste from the West, and it doesn't actually work in a country like India, where the density of population is high, where 90 million households actually live in one room. And when I'm talking about one room, I'm talking about 8 people living in one room. So stay at home acquires a completely different context, where slums like Dharavi have 8,000 common toilets for 8 lakh people. So given your interest in public health, Rajat, what do you step back and make sense? How do you make sense of what's happening to us, these surreal times that we're living in?
Well, I think firstly, I would say that this is just absorbing from outside and talking to various people. In general, I mean, I think India has so far done well. I mean, in this response. Of course, there's a lot of concern as to where and how it will go. I mean, you mentioned Dharavi. I was just reading that it's so much under control in Dharavi. It's pretty impressive in terms of how it has been contained. So kudos to people who have been doing those programs and making sure that that happened. You know, it is something, these kinds of diseases, I mean, in Public Health Foundation of India, we have been talking about establishing, now this is for the long term, really research on zoonotic diseases, which is one of the zoonotic disease. Yeah. And what practices in animal husbandry, in all kinds of practices that these kinds of pandemics can be prevented. So I am very much interested not only in the short term, which I think we have to do what we have to do and we have to live with this, but how do we in the long term prepare for good public health practices and so that these kinds of pandemics don't happen again. So right now in the PHFI, we are thinking about there are different Indian institutes of public health in different cities. And in the Hyderabad one, we are thinking about making it a center for zoonotic disease research. So I think long term, you have to really, in a country like India, as we said, the basic principle is that you cannot, you have to focus on preventive and promotive health rather than on curative health. You know, once this kind of thing happens, the system will be overwhelmed if it goes out of control. So you have to prevent. And that's the whole basis of it. And, I think it's important that we understand not only these kind of infectious diseases, but also the chronic diseases, which India has a very high load on and is a great killer. So to that extent, there's a lot of work to be done in terms of public policy, in terms of fact-based research on how it happens and education of people and so on. That's what we have to concentrate on.
Let me ask you finally, because you have such a keen understanding of the world of finance, markets, and the economy. I mean, in the United States of America, the emphasis has been almost as much on fiscal stimulus as managing the pandemic. In India, you're dealing with an extremely unequal society to begin with. So the disadvantages are many. You're actually containing a humanitarian crisis parallel to containing the pandemic. What is your sense of the hit on the economy, both globally and in India?
Well, I mean, US is fortunate in that dollar is the global currency and it can do a lot of, it can print a lot of money without, and to that extent, the economy has been clearly helped, and you see that in the market. The inequality in the US is also a major problem. Of course, in India it is, and I think that in the end, somebody has to pay for these kinds of things. I think the response has not been, it's a very short-term focus, which is necessary. I'm not saying that. It has helped a lot, but in the end, I think we have to work at reducing the inequality. I mean, the taxation system in the US needs to get reformed. I mean, every time it's basically favors the rich. I mean, keeping interest rates as low as we have kept them, in fact, increases inequality and favors the rich, and so on. So, and I think India, the challenge is quite different. I mean, it has to do with job creation more than anything else. We have to figure out how to create enough jobs.
Okay, I'm seeing the clock entering the red space. So I'm just going to ask you a 15-second closing comment. Mind without fear is what we're calling this session. If you had to give one learning from life on how people can lose their sense of fear, because everyone has fear. The thing is about either sidestepping the fear or overcoming it, right? What's that one mantra that you'd make your life's mantra today?
I think, I would say that the philosophy of being a karmyogi, which has got to do with, do what you think is right and do it with the best of your capabilities and the best of your intentions, and don't worry about the results. If you're not worrying about the results, you have no fear, because basically all you're doing is, this is what I think is the right thing to do. So if I have to pick one thing, I would say, get the consequence of what you're doing. And don't be paralyzed by it. Think about what is the right thing to do.
And also, in the end, we all answer to ourselves above and beyond anything else. And I think that's an important lesson. Rajat Gupta, what a pleasure talking to you. You've had a roller coaster, dramatic life. You've seen the highs, you've seen the lows, but that's what life is all about. And I think life does test us, not in the good moments, not in peacetime, but in moments of conflict, strife, and difficulty. You're still there, you're still standing, you're still invested in a million things at once. So I think that's what the journey of life, in a sense, is all about. Thank you so much for talking to us at India Global Way. Thank you, and it's over to you in London.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That was a great conversation. What a candid conversation that was. I enjoyed it myself. Welcome to India Global Week. Namaste. I'm Priyanka Deo reporting from New Delhi. We have a great panel discussion coming up here at India Global Week, but share your thoughts with us. Use hashtag #BeTheRevival and share your thoughts and your questions up on social media. We have numbers here. I just heard this morning, as of this morning, day 2 of India Global Week, that we have 10,000 registered attendees, over 10,000 across 69 countries. So that's a huge number. As Manoj said, this is clearly a platform that's exchanging some great ideas and making implementation and impact happen. With that being said, stay tuned for our next panel discussion in just a few minutes here. Till then, we'll see you soon. Sit tight and stay tuned on India Global Week. This is Priyanka Deo.